real quick, before we go, we are actually going to talk about episode 2, but before we do, I wanted to make sure that the listeners know that you guys can go to saltynerdclub.com. If you guys enjoy what you hear and you want to support the podcast, you can go to saltynerdclub.com. You can sign up for our Patreon, $1, $5, whatever you feel like our content is worth. We are more than appreciative of it. You guys get access to some cool new content, some behind-the-scenes stuff, some bloopers. You get stickers and T-shirts. There's all kinds of different tiers and rewards. So go to saltynerdclub.com and you can help support this podcast, and we can make it even better than it is already. Next up, we're talking about Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Better or worse than Episode 1? You go.
Oh, boy. I'm going to go worse.
Worse?
Yeah.
Wow.
Danny, better or worse?
Better.
Better. Okay. Yeah. Kadish?
I actually think Attack of the Clones gets kind of a bad rap, but I think that Episode 1 and Episode 2 are equally bad.
Yeah, equally bad's fair. Yeah, equally bad.
Equally bad. Okay. I think Attack of the Clones is better, but not by much. It's,
every time I see online, it's like, rank your Star Wars movies the way you like them.
Yeah.
Those 2 movies always flip-flop for me.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So
yeah, episode. I was just like, as much action was in that movie, I was just bored. Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's because that was like when you ask my oldest son, that's his Star Wars movie. That's the first one he remembers seeing in the theater. It's his favorite one, which I always thought Episode 3 was his favorite. We actually had this conversation recently where he told me, no, it's actually Attack of the Clones. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, I'd name my cat Django. You know,
nice.
I was like, and I was like, well, sorry, that dude's head got cut off. But so I mean, like, so my memories of watching it are always, I'm kind of watching it through his eyes, and he loved it. And like, I mean, come on, we get to see Yoda kicking ass.
Oh, that was cringy.
Oh, come on.
No, it was terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like anytime, like you probably, for example, I will defend the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action reboot because my 2 youngest children loved it, and most of my friends hated it. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm watching a movie with my kids, I'm sure they do. But when I'm watching this movie with the kids and they can enjoy it, then like I'm enjoying that they're enjoying it. Maybe not so. Like maybe if I had seen that movie without them, I would not have liked it. But I kind of liken the Attack of the Clones to my experience with my younger kids with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because Devin just loved that movie. We saw that movie several times. He had the toys, like you remember when they're Padme and Anakin are tied up in that arena.
Oh yeah.
And that that monster.
The crab one or the rhino?
The
one?
rhino looking one.
Rhino one.
He had that toy set up. When he was a kid, he would play with them all the time.
Dude, I mean, George knows what he's doing. He was making toys for kids at work, because there's a lot of really cool stuff in these movies. It's just sad that the story doesn't hold up.
But I don't know. Like I wish there would have been more of the actual Clone War. You know what I mean? Because like I love the.
There's a whole TV series.
Well, who did the? See, I haven't watched any of those, but the original Clone Wars cartoon from Cartoon Network. I forget who did it.
Those were really
famous.
Good.
Super good.
The Samurai Jack guy. Right?
Yeah, and it ends right at the beginning of Episode 3. It shows you like how they get to, the Count Dooku fight. Yeah. Which I love that, by the way, when we talk about that. But that was like my biggest disappointment. Was I was really hoping to see more of the Clone Wars that they talked about in A New Hope, and like I was excited for like the 2 biggest things I was excited about when I heard about the prequels back in like '99 was that I was going to get to see the Clone Wars, and I was going to get to see the duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Yeah.
Right? Those were the 2 things I was looking the most forward to, and the latter we'll talk about later, but the former I just was really bummed about because it just wasn't enough.
They named the movie after like the last 8-10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But I think when I saw this in the movies, I was still like young enough to be excited for it, and I was ready, but I had lost some of that fever pitch of like nerdom. I just kind of was like along for the ride. And I remember recently when I rewatched this, I just realized like how freaking over the top everything was, to the point where it was almost boring. Like it's supposed to be like this big chase in the beginning through Coruscant. Never seen Coruscant before. Gorgeous chase. I'm like, this chase is like 10 minutes too long. Mm-hmm. Like you need to cut a good chunk of this chase out in order to keep the pace of the movie, because it gets bogged down and how tedious this chase gets, through the whole city. And I just
it was more playing with their CGI effects.
exactly, yeah. And I'm like, man, come on.
And the love story felt rushed to me too. That
So
was like the biggest
This
problem.
is the thing I want to talk about, which is that the reason this movie gets so much flack is because the crux of it, which is supposed to be the love story between Anakin and Padme, is one of the worst love stories ever put on film. Like, it completely derails the movie every time it's on there, because nobody in their right mind would fall in love with either of these two people, especially Anakin.
I really hate sand.
Yeah,
It gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere.
The thing that always comes to my mind when I watch this movie and I see how terrible the dialogue is for this love scene and how these characters are so mismatched.
It's not just that love scene. I mean, it starts. That wasn't the first thing I noticed.
Oh, he was super creepy
from the very beginning of the movie. From when they're going up the elevator to Padme's apartment.
Yeah.
And he's being
even more beautiful.
I mean, Anakin's just a smarmy little smartass to Obi-Wan the whole time, and it's just the dialogue didn't work.
Yeah, one of the worst parts about this, and this goes back to there not being a main character, is that when we see Anakin for the first time in this movie, he's already turned to the dark side. He's already like an evil little prick.
Yeah.
And as we go along and we see his interactions with Padme, he just gets more and more unlikable. And some of the dialogue in their scenes, like you really have to wonder, what were the people who wrote this thinking?
When Harrison Ford told George Lucas, "You can write this stuff, George, but you can't say it," like that applies 120% to all these movies, because he didn't have anybody like Harrison Ford or Lawrence Kasdan to check him on this dialogue and be like, "Hey, bro, this is weird and creepy. We need to rework this conversation."
Yeah, there's that line where he's like, "I'm haunted by the kiss you should have never given me." There's stuff that sounds good, like if you were reading it in like high literature or something like that, like if it was like someone's internal monologue. But when you actually hear, especially because I think Hayden Christensen's performance, like he was just miscast as Anakin Skywalker. I don't think he was a good choice for the role. Like his delivery on this was just like so.
This Salty Nerd podcast.
His delivery was so whiny and immature, and nothing about his performance made you like him, or like, I don't know any girl who's just like, oh yeah, Hayden Christensen, I can't wait to.
Well, like that's the thing though, is in some of the other movies that he's in, he's not terrible. I think it was just bad direction.
I didn't think he was bad in episode 3.
I liked him a lot in episode 3.
The thing with these movies is that at the time that they were making them, the whole digital sound stage where it's all blue screen or green screen or whatever, was so new that a lot of these actors who are arguably great actors, like, Ewan McGregor, Samuel L. Jackson, Natalie Portman, like they weren't used to basically having nothing to play off of, like just having to imagine like their surroundings, because they're just surrounded by blue
like
screen,
green and blue.
Like that was something that was kind of new when it came to Hollywood, and it really affected their performances because like they had nothing that they could like actually like ground themselves into when it came to doing this stuff, and it really shows. Like
other forms of CGI, the actors usually have like a tennis ball, or there's somebody's holding a big stick with like a T-Rex head on it that like, hey, this is where your visual is. If you look at back some of the behind the scenes stuff, you don't see that anywhere. George is like, here, sit on this block of blue and imagine it's a spaceship,
right?
And then just act like you're going really fast. The actors were at a disadvantage to begin with because they're working with all this new technology that George wanted to use, which is fine. I mean, pushing forward technology is arguably what Star Wars is all about.
I really think Anakin should have been more of like a Han Solo-ish type character as opposed to like a whiny kind of Luke Skywalker.
Well, anything that would have been more identifiable with it, like
you just picture Darth Vader as this big imposing kind of like manly figure. And the guy they got to play Anakin, it was just like, he was very slight. He was kind of effeminate. He was like whiny. It was nothing that really kind of, made him ingratiate himself into the audience.
Kind of to that point, I'm going to cross fandoms here, but this is one of the reasons I loved Michael Keaton as Batman, because he looked like the kind of guy that needed to be in a suit, because out of the suit, he's just so unimposing. So I kind of feel like maybe that's where George was thinking, well, I'm going to cast this frail kind of lanky kid.
No, George is just a really bad casting.
And then it could be. But
he does not have good instincts. When
you look at Hayden Christensen, and you're going to think the only way that dude could be scary is if he put on like a scary suit.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
You could say that about anyone, though. Oh, he would be scary if he had a scary suit on.
Well, that's true. Well, that's true. That's true. But if you're already yoked, you're going to be even scarier. I mean, like, when you put on a scary suit. But
once Hayden flipped and got turned into Darth Vader with the black robes and the hood and everything, he was pretty imposing.
I don't.
I had no problem believing that he could turn into.
Well, that's
Darth Vader
episode 3. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah,
in a
we'll
minute.
talk about that in a minute.
But this is this is
pertinent to the conversation.
before Clone Wars start. Anakin, and he's just supposed to be
he's still like
he's supposed to be a rebellious teenager, and that's how he plays off. But it just needed more work.
Yeah.
The interactions he had with Obi-Wan didn't work for me, and
Yeah, they were very cringy.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that all comes down to direction and
Right.
writing, right? I mean, if they were given a better dialogue script, to
Again, you can say that about any bad movie. If only this movie had a good script and good actors and good direction, it would have been
the actors
good.
were fine. You got some of the greatest actors that are working, but I mean, it just
This is why people always give me a hard time, because I always say George Lucas should have hired some people to help with the script and with the acting in this movie, because it's not good. It could have been good, but the performances weren't there. But like we've said, it was more about making toys and playing with the computer effects.
I also think Lucas's direction, like he specifically directed these actors to not put emotion into their performances and stuff like that. Just because, if you did any research into A New Hope and how Lucas directed that movie and his kind of
Faster and
track
more
record,
intense.
kind of a track record as a director, he's a very good technical director. Like, he understands the technology and he understands, how to do like some really amazing technophile stuff. But when it comes to directing actors and getting performances out of actors and crafting a story and stuff like that, he's not good. And when he basically removed anyone in his, orbit that could actually tell him that his ideas were bad and trying to rein him in. So he lost some of that check and balance system that you need as a director in order to kind of like rein you in from like your worst impulses. And everyone around Lucas, at least for the first 2 films before like the fan base really let him have it, basically was afraid to tell him his ideas were bad.
Well, you can even see it in some of the behind the scenes footage. You can see it in their faces.
Yes.
Which I think it doesn't even talk about that in the red letter media thing. I think he talks about that.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, you can see George sitting there with markers, like coloring. Okay, I want this CGI. I want this real.
During one of the test screenings, there was an editor who tried to basically voice his concern, and Lucas just obviously wasn't listening, and so he was just like, "Oh, screw it! I'm not going to waste my breath."
Yeah, I mean, you can.
I want to stay employed
for the test screening for episode 1. I mean, George straight up admits it. Was it Brad Bird? Not Brad Bird. It was one of the other technical guys that was working with George. He was like, in the span of like a minute and a half, you go from an intense battle.
That was the editor.
That was the editor. Yeah. Okay, you're going from an intense battle with Qui-Gon to mourning Qui-Gon's death to celebrating the destruction of the pseudo Death Star to now you're celebrating on Naboo with all the junk. Like, there's so much going on in this short. And then George is like, I may have gone too far in a few places. Like he knew, but then he continued that same type of activity in episode 2.
A lot of the problems that episode 1 had were like doubled down on in episode 2, where basically it's the same thing where you didn't have a main character. You had all these set pieces, which taken in isolation are pretty cool things, but don't work as part of a larger story. And it just feels like he was trying to do too much with not enough time to do it.
I think episode 2 had a main character. I think it very definitely was Anakin. You followed Anakin for the entire movie, and he didn't really have an arc to speak. He kind of was the same person at the end.
Anakin was not the one driving the action.
Who was it then?
He also didn't have any character development.
No,
he stayed the same character,
except for he got really pissed and killed a bunch of people.
There was no real main character in Attack of the Clones, and the most interesting storyline I thought was the whole kind of detective storyline that Obi-Wan goes down.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it's like you have all these disparate storylines where you have Obi-Wan, then you have Padme and Anakin, and to a certain extent, you have like the Yoda, Mace Windu kind of thing going on back home, but one of the biggest problems with these first 2 movies, and I guess you could lump Revenge of the Sith into this, is that one of the great things about the original trilogy was there was a consistent antagonist throughout all of it. So like you have this direct antagonist in Darth Vader, who's a constant menacing presence throughout all three movies. And so you're kind of building up to the big confrontation with him. A big problem with the prequel trilogy is that there is no direct antagonist throughout the movie or throughout the trilogy, and there is no clear-cut main character throughout the trilogy.
What about Sidious? I mean, like,
He's-
because
but
he
he's
culminates
the-
at the
So
end.
I'm talking about direct antagonists. So someone who's actively working against the main characters.
They switched it up. Yeah.
So in the first movie, the direct antagonist was Darth Maul, but then they killed him off, and so then they bring in Count Dooku and Jango Fett, but then they kill off Jango Fett, and Count Dooku
Doesn't really do anything.
well, he dies at the beginning of the third movie, and so there is no real carryover in terms of like the main bad guy. Like you do have Darth Sidious as like the overarching villain, but you could say he's the villain for all 9 movies.
Right.
So he's kind of like the big bad, but the direct antagonist was never fully developed in this. I think that the prequel trilogy loses something because you don't have this identifiable bad guy to fight against, and you don't have a strong main character to root for. So it was a very messy kind of story structure.
Can you guys imagine if Darth Maul didn't get cut in half? He maybe is a stalemate. Qui-Gon dies, Darth Maul books it out of there because he gets maybe Padme and her crew come and save.
Or maybe another one of those useless shields for no
Closes.
meaning
Yeah,
closes.
it separates them, so he just leaves. Imagine if Darth Maul had carried over through all 3 episodes, similar to how Darth Vader had, where he was the right-hand man to Sidious, and you had a battle between him and Obi-Wan consistently throughout the 3 movies, where you finally
gets revenge for killing his master. I think that would have been...
It would have been amazing.
You should have...
Way better.
Kadish's
Way better.
point is 100% true. Like instead of that, you get a half movie with Maul, a half movie with Dooku, and a half movie with this guy named Grievous that nobody freaking knows about.
Yeah.
There's this running subplot of the mystery of the Sith where the Jedi Council finds out that the Sith, who were thought to go extinct like 1,000 years ago, are actually still active. And in the first film, in episode 1, when Qui-Gon comes back to the Jedi Council and reports
I
on
fought
it,
a Sith.
yeah, they're all just like, really? I thought they were all dead. And so they're like, hey, why don't you take your teenage apprentice and go investigate this a bit further, and instead of getting like the whole council and being like, we gotta
Figure this out.
like this is number 1 priority right here.
Like, wait, a red lightsaber? You said? Oh boy. Okay, we got to do something.
A
about
guy
this.
in black robes, huh?
Red tattoos,
Red
horns.
tattoos,
like-
horns. He looked like the devil.
like you think that they would assemble a special task force just for this, because that's a big deal. But they're just like, no, Qui-Gon, you and your teenage psychic go handle it.
So you've been pretty quiet. What did you think about episode 2? Is there anything redeeming about it, or were you just so focused on Anakin's?
on my rewatch just yesterday, it didn't change my mind at all.
No.
It was just not a good movie. It was, I didn't even like the lightsaber fights at the end between Yoda and Dooku because it just, no.
See, I still find like there's peaks of enjoyment for me. Like I really like Obi-Wan's little mystery thing and fight with Jango. I was always.
that was.
I
cool.
always wanted to fast forward to like the cool parts.
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
the only parts that are really
Yeah.
interesting.
I like some of the stuff on the clone planet. With the soldiers being made and everything. But I only really appreciated that more after I watched Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Here's
it made it more
the
fun.
thing though. Like, so they really set up this rivalry between Jango and Obi-Wan, because like he's kind of like Obi-Wan's antagonist in his storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the climax of the movie,
Somebody else.
Mace Windu is the one who has to face off with Jango Fett.
And they're in the same arena too. It's not like you couldn't have done it.
Yeah, and you're like, why wasn't that Obi-Wan's
Exactly.
moment?
Well, it's because they wanted Samuel Jackson to do something cool with his purple lightsaber.
Yeah.
So,
This party's over.
Yeah. This part is over.
Sam Jackson is just Sam Jackson no matter what he plays.
So
Like there's so many questionable decisions like that in these movies where like just realistically from a structural storytelling standpoint, you should have certain things in these and
guys-
they don't do them.
There's too much going on, and they have the advantage of the crawl at the beginning of all 3 movies. So I wanted to pose this to you guys. Do you think it would have been better had they not even addressed the love story at all and just made it a part of the fucking crawl? In like episode 3, like so many years have passed.
the
and
dead
like
speak.
I don't know. I think
the love has blossomed
the love
between
story
the two.
needed to be there.
Oh God, it's just so terrible.
It was terrible, but it needed
the secret forbidden love affair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think you just needed a realistic romance there.
Yeah.
Like the romance between Han and Leia in Empire, like they barely had 2 words to say to one another in A New Hope, but by Empire, like you got to see them fall in love with each other, and you fell in love with them as a couple as it happened. And for whatever reason, in Attack of the Clones, George Lucas has this weird twisted idea of what romance is, and it's like frolicking in like the grass.
The first scene we have with Anakin is him straightening his robes in the elevator. He's like, "Oh man, I hope she remembers me because I've done nothing but think about this chick I haven't seen for 10 years."
Yeah, and his behavior would make any other normal girl like call the police.
Creeper.
Yeah, right.
She said it outright. She's like, "Would you stop looking at me like that? You're making me uncomfortable." And he's like, "Oh yeah, am I now?"
He's like touching her bare back with his finger.
Oh my god, it's so cringy. Stop. Okay,
I've done nothing but think about you for 10 years.
so
Like, oh, well, you're a weird little boy.
And her whole thing for why they can't be together, she's like, "I'm a senator.
you're super weird.
We can't be together because I'm a senator."
Anyway,
Well, he's a Jedi.
He's a
Jedi,
Jedi.
aren't, they're supposed to be like monks or priests. They can't have.
Shaolin monks.
Yeah.
But anyway, you guys reminded me when you're talking about the battle in Geonosis. I think the worst thing in the world was freaking C-3PO's little traunt through the droid factory.
Oh, I hadn't even got there yet.
Oh God,
Brutal.
that is the worst. Anything it tops everything else.
That's yet another set piece that was just shoehorned into the movie
where
because
did-
they wanted to show off.
I'm sorry, but even the cartoon Clone Wars, which everybody loves, they make R2-D2 into a freaking superhero. The dude can do anything.
Oh, you know what's funny is I noticed this when I was watching the movie yesterday. Is there's a scene where they're back on Naboo where R2 is struggling to go up steps, right? Struggling to go up steps.
Yeah.
And they go back to the factory, the next day.
And he's like flying.
And he's flying around with his jetpack and stuff. It was funny, yeah.
I don't get it, man. I don't like that stuff. Like this is the type of thing that makes me a purist for like the original trilogy because I'm like, none of this stuff exists.
Kenny Baker would not be flying around with his
this is nonsense.
jetpack.
Kenny Baker, rest in peace, buddy. Any other thoughts about episode 2, or are we done bashing on it? Because I feel like that's all we've done so far. Is there anything anybody liked about this movie besides like lightsaber fights or anything like that?
I liked all
Ewan
the
McGregor.
I liked all
kicked
the
ass.
I liked all of the Obi-Wan's plot. I mean, we already pointed out we didn't get the payoff with him in Jango Fett, but
Everything's just so contrived in this movie.
but I mean, I liked I still was like, oh damn, when Anakin gets his arm cut off, you know what I mean? So it's just
I like the little subsonic explosion things in the asteroid field.
I was just going to say that.
Dude,
it's like, what
go
was
ahead.
that sound effect supposed to be?
I don't know, but it was
It's like
amazing.
It's like a giant spring
it's
going off.
the
or
same
something.
sound effect they use for the Dark Knight soundtrack. That boom.
Yeah,
It was weird.
It was there's really cool elements to all these movies, and they're
Again, technically, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Script and acting.
I do have to say my favorite part of this movie, which is I can remember when I was in the theater, the moment where Yoda whips out his lightsaber, everyone lost their shit.
They did.
Yeah.
Like they and I still to this day I love the moment where I finally get to see Yoda fight with a lightsaber. Now I know it's not in keeping with his character, but at the same time I was like, you know what, it was cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, what? Like, who did that?
That was Jude.
Wow.
That's a little soundboard.
The thing about that is, like, I don't want to poo-poo on what you like, but it's like when Dooku's like, obviously our battle cannot be decided by who's stronger in the Force. Like, yes, it freaking can. Yoda can whoop your ass.
Yoda would whoop his ass.
So he's all like, I just didn't understand why Yoda just didn't take it to him.
The greatest part was like after he has that big crazy fight and he's jumping around doing all those acrobatics.
Picks up his cane.
He just picks up his cane and he like hunches back over and he's like, "Arr." He just goes back to being old Yoda.
Hobbles over.
And
the Force is a powerful
while
ally.
I was rewatching it, every time Yoda showed up on screen, Jude was like, "Oh look, it's old baby Yoda."
It's old baby Yoda. He had a floating.
And I kept being like, "No, it's just Yoda."
He had a floating